Harland David Sanders was born on September 9, 1990, into a poor farming family in Henryville, Indiana, USA. Young Harland's childhood might have passed peacefully had tragedy not struck when he was 5 years old. His father, Wilbur David, passed away after a severe fever, leaving the heavy burden of providing for the family on the shoulders of his gentle mother, Margaret Ann. To raise her 3 young children, Margaret was forced to take a job peeling tomatoes for a canning factory and taking in sewing work at night. Because his mother was frequently away from home, Harland, despite being only a 6-year-old child, had to take on the responsibilities of an adult, managing the household chores and taking care of his 2 younger siblings. It was during these arduous days that Harland's culinary talent began to blossom. By the age of 7, he had mastered cooking, preparing meals for his siblings himself using the meager ingredients available in the house. At the age of 10, Harland began working extra jobs at nearby farms for a mere $2 a month to help his mother. When he was 12, his mother remarried. However, his stepfather was extremely harsh and frequently beat him. Unable to endure the toxic living environment, at 13, Harland decided to drop out of 7th grade, pack his bags, and leave home, embarking on a turbulent journey of independence. First, he worked as a horse carriage painter, then moved on to become a streetcar conductor in New Albany. At 16, he lied about his age to join the U.S. Army and was stationed in Cuba as a mule handler. However, he was honorably discharged just a few months later. Returning to the U.S., Harland worked as a blacksmith, then transitioned to shoveling coal for a railroad company. He married Josephine King in 1908 and had 3 children. To support his family, he worked exhaustingly but was still fired by the railroad company due to his quick temper. Undeterred, he spent his free time at night studying law and began practicing as a lawyer at the Justice of the Peace Courts in Little Rock. One might have thought this would be a stable career, but his legal profession came to an abrupt end after just 3 years when he got into a courtroom brawl with his own client. After that, he continued his streak of job hopping, selling life insurance, operating a ferry boat, and selling Michelin tires, only to lose his job when the company closed its branch due to the economic depression. By the time he reached 40, Harland Sanders' life was still a series of zeros. In the eyes of many, he was a complete failure, no career, no wealth, and his youth had already passed him by. The first turning point in his culinary career came in 1930, while America was sinking into the Great Depression. At age 40, Harland Sanders was offered the opportunity by the Shell Oil Company to manage a gas station in the town of Corbin, Kentucky. Noticing that drivers stopping at the gas station were often hungry, he came up with the idea of utilizing his small dining area behind the station to serve food. The initial menu was very simple, consisting mainly of Southern family dishes he'd learned in his childhood, such as country ham, string beans, and especially pan-fried chicken. His fried chicken was so delicious that word spread far and wide. Before long, people were coming to his gas station not to buy gas, but to eat chicken. In 1935, the governor of Kentucky was so impressed with the quality of his food that he bestowed upon Harland Sanders the honorary title of Colonel for his contributions to the state's cuisine. Thus, the moniker Colonel Sanders was born. However, he still faced a major problem. Traditional pan-fried chicken took up to 30 minutes to cook, which was too long for hurried travelers. If deep-fried, the chicken would cook faster, but the meat would become dry and lose its flavor. In 1939, a new invention hit the market, a pressure cooker. Instead of using it to cook soup, Sanders modified it into a pressure fryer. Around the same time, he perfected his secret recipe consisting of 11 different herbs and spices. The combination of the pressure fryer and this spice blend created the perfect fried chicken, a crispy crust, evenly infused seasoning, and meat that remained tender and juicy on the inside, with a cooking time reduced to less than 10 minutes. His business boomed brilliantly, and the restaurant expanded into a 142-seat establishment named Sanders Court and Cafe. It seemed as though the Colonel's later years would pass peacefully with the success of his restaurant, but fate tested him once again. In the 1950s, the U.S. government began replanning the highway system. All traffic, the restaurant's main source of customers, was diverted onto the new route. The once bustling Sanders Court and Cafe was now completely deserted. Suffering severe business losses, he was forced to auction off his entire restaurant, gas station, and property to pay off his debts. At the age of 65, an age when people are typically resting and enjoying their retirement, Harland Sanders lost everything. His only assets at the time were a beat-up old Ford car, a few pressure cookers, and a meager Social Security check of $105 a month from the government. Legend has it that upon receiving that $105 check, he was so desperate that he considered suicide. He sat under the shade of a tree, taking out a pen and paper to write his will, but as he began to write about his life, he realized he hadn't achieved anything significant, and that there was one thing he did better than anyone else in this world: cooking fried chicken. The determination to start over blazed within the 65-year-old man. Instead of sitting at home waiting to die with his meager allowance, Colonel Sanders loaded a few pressure cookers, some bags of flour, and spice boxes into his old Ford and began roaming the roads of America to knock on the doors of various restaurants. His plan was to cook his secret recipe fried chicken for restaurant owners to taste. If they liked it, he would propose a franchise agreement. For every piece of chicken sold, he would receive a 4-cent commission. That journey was far from glamorous. The over 60-year-old man had to sleep in the back seat of his cramped car, brushing his teeth and washing his face at public gas stations. And the worst part was the rejection. Restaurant after restaurant shook their heads. People criticized his chicken, mocked his appearance, and laughed at his crazy 4-cent commission idea. 1 rejection, 10 rejections, 100 rejections. Anyone else would have given up, but not Harland Sanders. He had an ironclad belief in the quality of his food. According to legend, he was rejected 1,009 times. It wasn't until his 1,010th attempt that he received his first nod of approval from Pete Harmon, a restaurant owner in Salt Lake City, Utah. From then on, the name Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, was officially born. Harmon's restaurant saw its revenue triple in just 1 year, with 75% of it coming from Sanders chicken. Pete Harmon's success was the ultimate launching pad. A slew of other restaurant owners began to hear of his reputation and sought out Colonel Sanders to request a franchise. By 1960, when he was 70, there were over 200 franchised KFC restaurants across the U.S. and Canada. By 1963, this number had reached 600, making KFC the largest food service business in the United States at the time. In 1964, at the age of 74, unable to handle the immense workload of an empire growing far too quickly, Colonel Sanders decided to sell most of his shares in the company to a group of investors for $2 million, a colossal sum at that time. However, he did not truly retire. Under the contract, he retained the management rights for KFC in Canada, where he later moved, and became the lifelong brand ambassador for KFC with an annual salary of $250,000. For the rest of his life, Colonel Sanders flew hundreds of thousands of miles each year to visit KFC stores worldwide, promote the brand, and appear on television. He was also famous for being extremely strict about quality. Even though he had sold the company, he still frequently made incognito visits to KFC locations. If he found that the fried chicken tasted off or the gravy was made incorrectly, he was ready to demand it be made properly. For him, the food quality and the honor of the Sanders name were more important than any profit. On December 16, 1980, Colonel Harland Sanders passed away at the age of 90 after a battle with leukemia. A successful startup is never an easy path, but starting a business at 65, empty-handed and deeply in debt like Colonel Sanders, is a story of legendary proportions. Over 1,000 rejections could not break the will of a man who had tasted all the bitterness of life. The legacy Harland Sanders left behind is not just a giant fast food chain with its famous 11-spice fried chicken, but also an invaluable lesson in perseverance. Success has no age limit, and the failures of yesterday, today, or the 1,009 times before are merely paving stones leading you to the glory of tomorrow. Dare to dream, dare to act, and never give up. That is the eternal spirit of the KFC Colonel.